Welcome. I'm Jonathan from the YMCA, and welcome to our program today. I appreciate you joining us. This month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm fortunate to have two guests today. We're going to speak about living with mental illness. We'll hear of a personal journey, as well as the professional guidance that would support us in taking on mental illness and moving towards greater mental health. One of my guests today is Christine Frey, founder of Brain XP, and she's an award-winning youth mental health advocate and an author. I'm excited to learn more about what she's doing in the community at this point in time, and she's very active on many fronts. Also, we are joined by Dr. Ryan Macciomei, a licensed clinical psychologist at Sharp Healthcare Program. She leads the child and adolescent intensive outpatient programs. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, Christine, will you start with just sharing a little bit about how you have met the experience of mental illness in terms of dealing with anxiety, depression, and just share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, of course. So my journey starts a couple of years back, almost 10 years now, I think. I'm 20 years old. So going back in time to when I was 10 years old, I started struggling with anxiety. And my anxiety came in the form, or at least it came to me, to my knowledge, when I went on a sleepover with my best friend, and I had a very difficult time falling asleep. I had this pit in my stomach. I didn't know what to do. I felt a lot of anxiety, but I didn't know what anxiety was at the time. So I ended up going to counseling to see how I could make these sleepover experiences better. And that's where I learned what anxiety is, and that's what I was experiencing. So anxiety was the first mental health challenge that I faced. That kind of grew into a depression. So when I was 12 years old, I entered into a very severe depression, and it was accompanied by some psychosis symptoms. So I was experiencing the anxiety, the depression, hallucinations, all those things. And I was ultimately diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I had a little bit of everything. I had some mood changes, appetite changes, the depression, anxiety, all these different things. And it wasn't easy to learn how to manage it, but I had have a very supportive family who really helped me go on this journey and come out overcoming most of these challenges and managing my mental health to this day.
I just think about the age that you spoke of, being a 10-year-old and being presented with these different mental health challenges. And I just wonder, how you experienced that. You've kind of given me the clinical journey that you were presented with, but I just wonder what that was like experientially.
I would say it was very difficult, but it really wasn't the challenges with my mental health that was the hardest part. It was the stigma that came with it. So it really wasn't that I was experiencing anxiety or depression or psychosis. Those things I could learn to cope with, but seeing how my friends left me and seeing how their parents formed these judgments of me and the school administration, that was what really broke me per se. And I think that what that felt like, it just felt like disappointment, and it made me feel like a burden, and it made me feel that my mind was the cause of everything. But at the end of the day, I know that my mind is very special, and that's why I created Brain XP, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But the actual experiences, it was the stigma that really hit me.
Thank you. Dr. Macciomei, share a little bit about what Christine has presented there in terms of onset at 10 years old and just how that has evolved for her. Is that a typical course of onset, if there is such?
It certainly can be. We're seeing more and more rates of child and adolescent mental health problems really occurring younger and younger. And there's lots of reasons for why that's occurring. And many people are arguing that the pandemic, of course, has not helped at all. And kids are struggling now more than ever. Certainly we see higher rates of childhood, adolescent depression, anxiety. There's more social, peer, academic challenges that come along with that. And really, I think adolescence is already such a tumultuous time mixed with the recent challenges with the pandemic, and it's really created a perfect storm for really the highest rates of child and adolescent mental health problems we've seen in I believe. Yeah.
And I appreciate that there's greater attention and awareness being brought. We're in a month where there's, a lot of information and resources and conversations like this happening. So I appreciate that. And I also know from what you're saying, Dr. Macciomei, that the pandemic seems to have escalated the incidence and the severity. Some of the statistics I see about suicide ideation, and acts of suicide is pretty profound. Christine spoke of really the compounding challenge, or even the more preeminent challenge of the mental health stigma. What can you say about the stigmatization of mental illness?
Well, mental health stigma has been around a very, very long time. One of the reasons I love working with child and adolescent populations is because these new groups of kids are really working hard to be social justice advocates and are really focused on one of their issues being mental health destigmatization, and are really trying strongly to advocate for emotional expression, not being afraid to share that they go to a therapist, talking about the things that they're learning and doing in therapy, and really opening up that dialogue to be able to better discuss it in school, with friends, with family. So I think we're seeing a lot of positive changes in that regard, but certainly we have a really long way to go. And we've had really a long, complicated history of mental health stigma in the United States, certainly, but of course around the world as well. And I think it's going to take a lot of time. Yeah,
that's an excellent point. So Christine, Dr. Macciomei sounded like she was describing you a little bit in terms of that activism and kind of creating greater awareness. Tell me a little bit about the efforts that you've made from the experience that you've had.
Yeah, so after I felt I was at a point where I was ready to share my story, was when I was about 16 years old. So my advocacy started when I was 16. I sat down and I typed and I typed and I typed, and I got this whole manuscript of my autobiography typed out. And while I was typing it, it was very hard because I was reliving the experiences that I felt I had overcome. So bringing those back was difficult, but I realized that's what I needed. It was very therapeutic. So after I typed the manuscript out for my autobiography, I then self-published it. I had it edited and then self-published it when I was 16. And about a year later, the book had become an international award-winning book. And at that point, I decided that this book is more than just a book. There's more that I can do, and there's more people that I can help than just the readers of this book. And that's when I decided to create the Brain XP project and the Brain XP community. I'm not sure if now would be a good time to explain what Brain XP is. Is that all right?
Please do.
Awesome. So Brain XP is a term that my mom created when I was 13 years old. I was walking my dog Sparky one day with my mom. And I told my mom, I said, I hate the stigma. I hate being labeled as mentally ill, being branded like this. And I just feel so like a burden and like there's such a negative light on me. So she said, okay, then let's call mental illness something different. And so we bounced some ideas back and forth and we came up with Brain XP. And so Brain XP stands for Brain Expanded. It's a new way of looking at mental illness. So instead of labeling each other as mentally ill, sick, crazy, or psycho, we acknowledge our brains are simply expanded and we think in ways that other people might not think. So with management and maintenance, we're capable of achieving extraordinary things. That's the concept. It started with the book, which I titled Brain XP, but then it became the project and community, and we are helping a lot of teens in our community to this day, and their parents and their families.
That's fantastic. Dr. Macciomei, I want you to have a chance to weigh in on this as well. I love what Christine has done in terms of, first off, the journaling aspect of, she had made such progress in her life related to mental illness and coping, and then to revisit it and write it. I would guess it would provide even deeper healing in some ways. And then to transform that into doing something socially to support others. What would you like to share about that?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for being such an amazing advocate and speaking out. I think that's so courageous and it's so important to be able to do. And I know that you're improving and impacting so many lives with your project, and I'm just really honored to be part of this talk with you. You're right. We do know that when people work through and think about the things they've struggled with, it's really a beautiful opportunity to allow them to better heal and grow, and also share that with other people. So this idea that Christine was sharing about really working through and doing a very deep dive into her own experiences, that really helps someone work through, make meaning, make sense of that journey in a way that it can help really kind of turn that negative into a positive. And I love this beautiful concept of really the brain being expanded, because it's absolutely true. And that really goes back to the stigma, right? This belief that someone who has mental illness is other and different and problematic, when in fact they're just wired differently and actually can bring a lot of really beautiful, unique, amazing perspectives to the table. And it's important, and it's about time that we start to listen and understand that.
Very, very well said. Wonderfully expressed. Thank you, Dr. Macciomei. Christine, I'm curious in terms of in your journey, what treatments you found effective or preferred in terms of your experience?
Yeah, so one treatment that I consider a treatment, but it's a coping skill that I developed. I taught myself to play the guitar and to record music throughout this process, and that was very, very helpful for me. But in terms of other treatments, I was in therapy, and I was in actually a program, a county-funded program in San Diego called Kickstart. And that's an early psychosis prevention center program. And at that program, it was outpatient, but I was there a lot. I got individual therapy, family therapy, multi-family group therapy, school help. They helped me get an IEP at school. They helped me in so many ways. They also had peer support. So all those different treatments put together made a great plan for me to overcome my challenges. But I will say that I could have had all of those treatment options, but if I was not willing to try and put in the work to get better, it wouldn't really matter. You have to have a willing player. And I think that I'm very fortunate to have a family to support me, to help me put me on the path to be a willing player.
That's an excellent point. Dr. Macciomei, it might be extraordinary that Christine had such support, but if you would share in terms of your professional experience, what might be the most impactful treatment modalities in your practice and or from research related to anxiety, depression, psychosis, bipolar?
Absolutely. So most people have heard of, at this point, cognitive behavioral therapy. That really is the most prevailing approach towards treating most mental illnesses, certainly depression and anxiety. And really at Sharp Healthcare, that is really the basis of the child and adolescent groups and treatments we run here. At Sharp, we have inpatient therapy, we have partial hospitalization program, and we have intensive outpatient therapy, which is really similar to and incorporates many of the elements Christine just described. It is really important to have that family involvement, multifamily group, but also to have those services to help engage the school to better understand the kids as well.
That's excellent to hear. If you will, Christine, share a little bit about your next steps. It sounds like you have Project XP System Hope. And so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we offer many different services and resources. A lot of them are free with Brain XP. So by going to brainxp.org, which is our website, you're going to find tons of free resources. So blog posts, podcast episodes, educational YouTube videos, music videos. They're all very teen focused and mental health focused. So we have all these things and resources for free. We also have our community, which is on Instagram and TikTok. And on TikTok is where we're most active and where we are most engaged. We actually just at the beginning of May, believe it or not, for Mental Health Awareness Month, we just reached 10,000 community members on TikTok. So we are definitely growing. It's not been very long we've been on TikTok, so it's been really cool to see the engagement and to see the requests for videos and the feedback from the kids. It's just incredible. But besides our resources in our community, we also offer some services. So we have something unique to Brain XP called the System of Hope. And the System of Hope is a special, unique system that my mom and I created that is based on lived experience that takes youth, teens, their families from wherever they're at, whatever struggles they're going through, and it helps them learn to cope and become their own advocates. And it's just this 4-step system that stands for HOPE. And so we teach that in presentations and private trainings, and we are launching very soon a summer webinar series for teens where they can learn the system of HOPE and really implement it into their lives, especially when they go back to school, because school is one of the biggest places that they're at. And so we're definitely looking forward to starting that webinar series and expanding even more.
Wow, you're doing so many amazing things. I'm really in awe of the impact that you have and how you continue to innovate and get to the population that you're wanting to serve. Dr. Macciomei, I want to go back just for a second. I practice as a therapist. I don't want to take for granted what the knowledge about cognitive behavioral therapy is. I'm aware of it, but if you could just give a snapshot of what that methodology is.
Absolutely. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a mental health treatment that is very well established, very well researched, and it's been proven effective to treat a variety of mental health disorders and diagnoses. Really, the core basic underlying factor of this is this idea that, there are 3 interacting parts: our emotions, our behaviors, and our thoughts. And really, when we have challenges with one, there's this domino effect that impacts the others. In the same vein, if we use coping skills towards one, it can also impact the others in a positive way. So for example, perhaps I'm feeling really sad, and then I start to have this thought, nobody likes me. I may engage in isolating or not spending time with friends. And so those 3 components can really help perpetuate my sadness and depression in a way that keeps me stuck. So cognitive behavioral therapy helps target each of those different places. So maybe we're working on and thinking about emotional expression, emotional awareness, how we're feeling that emotion, when we notice it coming on. We're also talking about the cognitive or thought component of that, which is really, no one likes me, working to challenge that, provide evidence to the contrary, maybe even use some positive affirmations to help prompt and change that thought pattern. And then the behavioral component. So maybe instead of isolating, I identify, something I can do that is engaging with family. Maybe I choose one friend I'm going to reach out to each day. And something I think that's really amazing that Christine touched on actually regarding behaviors is so many kids now have access to social media. And regardless of what you see and believe and think about social media, it is here to stay. It is part of our world, and our teens are inundated with the media and the things that are on social media. And I talk to families so frequently about this idea that the immediate response is, let's take away the cell phone. When in fact, teens will say, that's my only lifeline, that's my only connection. I can't do any skills if I don't have that. And of course, there are skills they can do without their cell phone. But the truth is, in the 21st century, kids are connected in that way. So I love this idea and think it's a beautiful concept to be really trying to change the narrative on social media to make it more positive, more engaging, more mental health focused, decreasing the stigma and increasing the community and the ability to talk about coping skills and the way that we would manage things in a way that kids could do from home, from anywhere. So I think that's an awesome other skill kids can use to really balance and challenge some of the mental health problems that they're having.
Thank you. I'm thinking about how fortunate in some ways Christine is to have the family resource and that kind of support. And I'm aware that equity and access related to mental health and mental illness, it isn't available to everybody. And so I think of, as you spoke, Dr. Macciomei, in terms of social media, that gets resources, support, information out there. And so I'm just trying to think in other veins, how does someone access mental health services? What else is available? I appreciate what you shared about SHARP and the array of services, but how do we ensure that there is greater equity and access for those challenged with mental illness?
Well, I think that starts with who we vote for and who we put in office, to be honest with you. That's probably a conversation for a different platform, but I think it starts there. And I think it's really important that we continue to advocate for the needs in our community, in our county, and recognize that this is something that's been here for a long time and we've chosen to perhaps neglect, or we really haven't provided the adequate resources to, and now is the time. So I do think the more communication, the more open forums, the more opportunities to have dialogue about this issue, the more, we can no longer ignore it. As far as, there are expanded programs in our community every month. I know the pandemic alone, although it's been really negative for many people, the access to mental health services has really decreased. More people are in need, and fewer people are providing or able to meet that need of services. But I do think that there have been many programs within the community that have started up and are trying to open their doors now as a result of recognizing that need. So I'm really hopeful that there will be sort of this post-traumatic growth, if you will, after the pandemic, with the idea of really increasing access to services in our county. And I know there's a lot of places that are really working on developing that.
Excellent point. I remember hearing early on in the pandemic, the discussion about the next pandemic being a mental health, mental illness pandemic. And so we're starting to see some of the seeds of that being expressed. Christine, if you could, I'd like to touch on just the journey of mental health, mental illness, because it is for a lifetime, and just where you might be in that journey, and if there's been bumps in the road, and just how you've met those, but just as we speak to the lifelong journey.
It's absolutely a lifelong journey. So just because I might be doing well right now and I'm making accomplishments and I'm succeeding, doesn't mean that I won't have bumps in the road to come, because it is a lifelong journey. The thing though about me though, and people that I've worked with, is that once you develop your coping skills, it gives you a better shot at managing and maintaining the healthy mind that you have. So as long as you have the treatment and the resources and your coping skills, you can overcome those bumps to come. So it's not necessarily about thinking, I'm going to live with this forever, even though we will live with it forever. It's about managing it so that it doesn't become too overwhelming. And that's basically what I'm doing right now. Right now, I've been doing very well with my mental health, but I've had some bumps in the road. And because I have my coping skills and my supports, I've been able to overcome those bumps. I will say that probably one of the hardest things for me is that my family watched me struggle when I was struggling, and they really helped me, and they got in there with me and we worked together. But it's much different when now I am the person watching some other people in my family struggle on top of managing my own symptoms. So it's definitely a balancing act, and being there for others, but being there for yourself too. That's where the whole concept of self-care comes in. And so right now, as we speak, that's the number one thing that I'm doing, is practicing self-care so that I don't get overwhelmed by everyone else's struggles who are around me, as well as my own.
Excellent, very important, the self-care mechanism. And I was just thinking about the cognitive behavioral approach, and over the life cycle, maybe the need to update, the mantra, the affirmations, the different coping mechanisms. Dr. Macciomei, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. We know that coping is going to look different, and it's different for people each day, actually. And we talk a lot about really having a variety of skills in your toolbox, so that what works for you when you're sad might not work for you when you're anxious, and what works at 2 p.m. might not work at 2 a.m. So we really have to have this variety of skills and really think through what's going to work for me today, what can I try? And, if one's not working, you try a different one, and really talking about like that commitment to skill use for those long-term goals. I think it's, Christine was discussing this idea of bumps in the road, and I think that's a really important concept to recognize. Recovery is not the absence of stressors. Recovery is the way that we approach those stressors differently. And the reality is life is challenging. We are going to have bumps in the road. And when we do have different coping skills or things that we've used in the past, and we have supportive people around us, it increases the likelihood that we're going to be able to cope effectively. So I can completely understand needing to change and modify coping skills. I think just as mental illness might be lifelong, so is that need to practice coping skills and try out new things.
That's excellent. I think of a mindful practice, and one of the concept that's always been helpful for me to hold on to is that a challenging time will pass, a wonderful time will also pass, even though we want to hold on to those. but just the recognition that it's not enduring, so to speak, that it's like, clouds or weather that are passing through, and just to be able to be present, bring resources forward for each of those moments in time. Christine, what else would you like to share, just as we're getting to the end of our time together? Any other next steps, any other things that you'd like to share if people wanted to reach out and get more information?
Yeah, I would say for my last piece of advice, if I have any way of giving advice, would be also trigger identification, because that's the thing that helped me the most, was identifying my triggers, tracking each day what set me off, what created the psychotic episode, what made me sad. Identifying those triggers was my lifesaver, because that ultimately led me to the path of coping and knowing when I needed my coping skills. But as far as next steps, I'd love to see everyone who watches this webinar in our community. You can always visit brainxp.org to learn everything about us and join our community there as well. We have a free newsletter. We have our social media platforms, both TikTok and Instagram. Our username is @brainxpproject. And you can always reach out to me there via email. But brainxp.org is our center, so you should probably start by going there.
Fantastic. Dr. Macciomei, any closing thoughts?
I think that Christine did a beautiful job highlighting all of the different opportunities that BrainXP has, and I want to just plug Sharp Mental Health, our Sharp Mesa Vista Hospital. The programs that we have are available to people in the county and community that, if they need in-person services, if they need higher levels of care, they're certainly able to reach out to Sharp Healthcare.
That's fantastic. I also think it's important to note the YMCA has an array of services for youth and family services and childcare services. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to partner with yourself. And most important for me is really to express my appreciation for the important advocacy and important work that is being done in the community. So thank you both for joining us. And for everything that you do, and for all of you that have been with us, thank you very much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.